So welcome everybody once again. As you can see on your screen, we have the agendas for this meeting. So our agendas and the timing. So one of the agenda will be reviewing the agenda, and the agenda is the Gender Community of Practice agenda. We'll be able to take you through it. Then we'll also be able to have a session on presenting topics from the December meeting. And also we'll have some breakout room sessions where we'll be able to discuss. We'll also have a chance for the breakout group to present back to the rest of the team. And as I said before, that today we are joined with a team from PASET. They'll be able to share with us the news and also projects that they are working on that we feel would be really great if you could all also come in and join our hands in making it successfully. So they'll be able to take us through. Then we'll also have a wind down session where we'll also be wrapping up the meeting. So once again, if anything comes to your mind or any issues comes up, feel free to put it in the chat box or raise up your hand.
So just as a quick summary for those of you who weren't able to join in the last meeting, YouthPower2 Learning and Evaluation has, this is the evidence framework and has several different goals of achieving system change via integration of positive youth development principles and frameworks, or PYD, to also construct high quality impact and sustainable youth programs, and to combine global PYD evidence to build stakeholder engagement, knowledge transfer, and application of learning. And it's a very large global initiative. And so these communities of practice, or COPs, are an important part of the different tasks of Y2PLE, Youth Power to Learning and Evaluation. Next slide. So these are the different tasks. Task 1 is a learning agenda implementation. Task 2 is to grow the PYD, or Positive Youth Development Learning Network. And so that's where the communities of practice fall, and particularly this gender community of practice. In addition, they have task 3 to enhance youthpower.org and youthlead.org platforms, which if you're on this call, you have registered on youthpower.org, and that's where you can create a profile, see who else is in the gender community practice, connect with other communities of practice, and as well access lots of different materials and tons of information. And so we encourage you also to sign up for youthlead.org if you haven't, and to actively engage. We have a gender community of practice discussion forum there as well, where we'd like to really get our members to more actively engage in discussions online. And so if you weren't part of the first meeting, this community of practice is really meant to be led by its members. Sheila and I are really the facilitators, and our goal is to help facilitate what you want to learn about, and also to give you opportunities to present your own work, or to lead a discussion, or to be actively engaged. So that's why in this meeting, we're really, for the rest of the meeting, going to give you time to meet one another and have discussions around the 5 topics of interest that we identified in the December meeting to help us set the agenda and give you an opportunity to lead. And of course, we'll help you to facilitate that. And we're really, because we're a larger group, this is a better way to find out what everyone's interests are and to gather that information, and we can follow up with you at a later date. So next slide. So as a next step, these were the 5 topics of interest that were expressed and voted on essentially at our last December meeting. So the first was to learn more about promising practices for the integration of gender across multi-sectoral programs. The second was to discuss gender and gender programming across cultures, because as you can probably tell from our members, this is a very cross-cultural and global group of people who practice in different parts of the world. So there was an interest in really learning from each other and what we're all doing in our work around gender. The third was to discuss the evidence base of gender best practices focused on the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And the fourth was gender and positive youth development and post-conflict environments. It's a mouthful. And then finally, too, there was a lot of interest around the Me Too movement and its applicability to sort of our own work and our own experiences, but then also how do we discuss this as a community related to gender and the work that we do. So next slide. So what we plan to do next in the meeting is to give all of the members some time to discuss these 5 topics of interest. It was logistically difficult to place people in a group necessarily of their interest. So we're just going to randomly break you into 5 groups and you'll get randomly placed into one of the topics. But we're hoping that this will sort of foster more discussion around each of these topics and give you a chance to talk about your own experience in the topic, your interest in the topic, but also in your group, you'll have some time to talk about any other topics that maybe didn't come up in the last meeting, or maybe you weren't at the last meeting. So basically, you'll be broken into those 5 discussion groups randomly. Sheila and I will join them as well. You'll have 20 minutes to discuss a series of questions that I'll go over on the next slide. If you can select one person to present back from your group, you'll have a few minutes where we'll present back from each group. And then if you can, while you are discussing in your group, click on this link and fill out the Padlet underneath your, there are the 5 different groups and 5 topics of interest. So if we can go to the next slide, Katie. So in each of your groups on the Padlet, if you can record your experience in this topic or programming area, whether you're willing to speak about this topic at a gender community of practice meeting, how would you like to have this information, a discussion, a presentation, both, something else? And we're asking people to include their name and organization and email on the Padlet so we can capture that of which group you were in, if you're comfortable and willing to share that. And then if you're also interested in another topic, but you're not in that group, please also indicate that underneath that topic. You can add your name, email address, and organization. Say, you know, I'm actually interested in this topic, even though you might have been in a discussion group for the other topics.
So I hope you had a very fruitful engagement in your breakout session rooms. So as we wait for everybody to come in, then we'll be able to get a chance to present. And on your screen, you can see the Padlet display. So I don't know if we could start with just quickly running through basically just highlighting what you discuss in your room, just briefly. So if you could start with group 1.
Hi, yeah, this is Kate Davin. Sorry, I thought Judith would present. I thought she was our facilitator, but I have notes a little. So we kind of were thinking through our own experiences. One of the things we mentioned was not using gender as a stand-in for just meeting women and girls, but to really think about gender in terms of gender minorities and other people who are trans, non-binary, or asexual gender, and also, but thinking to think through all of those meanings of gender and also make sure that they're represented really clearly in the team, and also sort of thinking of how we can, as the gender COP, try not to replicate any of those systems of discrimination. So yeah, we also had a few people who talked about their programs who were interested in presenting to share about their work. Yeah. We also talked about case studies of members who sort of want to be examples of practices across different sectors, as an example of how we could do this gender integration across sectors.
Thank you very much. So I'll briefly go, I could pick randomly what I'm seeing, just a summary of the Padlet. So I can see an emphasis on the evidence-based gender practices focused on SDGs, and also something that also came out in the group too is evidence-based programming topics that they will be keen on. And also another thing to also pick up on is the social norm exploration tool. I know this one will come up later on when we have our guest speakers for today we'll have them, and they'll also be able to introduce their work, which will also be focusing on our first working group for the gender community of practice. I could also see another thing that also came up was also an idea for the International Women's Day that we'll also be able to bring up during the wrap-up session. So for now, I'd like to bring on Brian and the Passage team to basically take us through their engagement and how, as members of the gender community of practice, we could come in and how we could lend our hand in it. So Brian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you don't mind advancing to my first slide.
Okay.
If possible.
And just as we're waiting to pull up the slides, I just wanted to let everyone know, we're going to collate the information from the Padlet and go ahead and organize probably our next sessions around these specific topics. And Sheila and I will reach out to you if you express interest in the topic, and then you'll hear back from us about what our next sessions are about, and we'll start to plan out the speakers. So, and thank you so much. Brian, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself too, so that everyone from the group knows who you are.
My name is Brian Shaw. I'm a senior research officer at the Institute for Reproductive Health at Georgetown University. I've been there for about 4 years, and mostly what I do is on the research side of that agenda within the Passages project, which I'm going to talk about briefly today. So a lot of what we really focus on is shifting norms for some of these health outcomes broadly within sexual and reproductive health is where mostly our interest lies. And we've been talking back and forth with YouthPower about potentially a working group based on where we are with the project and what it is that we're trying to develop, and thinking about consensus in various ways about some of the things that we've uncovered, some of the gaps that are remaining. And we thought this might be a good opportunity for a working group to really explore the evidence for norms. And when I say norms, I mean both social norms in a wider sense, as well as those norms that are more focused on gender and gender norms. So every time I'm saying norms, I mean both social norms and gender norms, because I know that this group is very much interested in that sort of gender side of things. And those norms that are relevant, particularly for youth reproductive health and well-being. So the next slide. So really briefly, most of this work that I'm going to be discussing is coming out of the Passages project, which is a USAID funded 6-year implementation research project that really it aims to address a broad range of social and gender norms at scale to achieve improvements in family planning, reproductive health, and gender-based violence. And we're really trying to build the evidence base and contribute to this capacity in the global community to strengthen normative environments to support reproductive health and well-being, especially amongst young men and women. So the next slide. So as if you keep clicking for a little bit, sorry, didn't get rid of the animations. Okay, so one of the things that we really focus on is focusing on these sort of key life course transitions when norms are a little bit more malleable, or they're being formed or formulated at this point in very young adolescents, newly married couples, and first-time parents' lives. So these are real sort of key intervention points that many of our programs that we actually have in the field, as I mentioned, I think primarily in Francophone Africa. But that's really sort of the age groups and the target groups that we've been focusing on traditionally in our programming, and also as well when we're trying to go through and look at the evidence for these. Next slide. So when I say social norms, I always want to give a definition because I think there are as many definitions as there are practitioners out there. But for us, we really, when we say social norms, we think what people in a group believe is typical or normal behavior and approved or appropriate behavior. And this is usually in relation to a reference group. So one of the things that we're trying to figure out is, do young people perceive, for example, that modern contraception use is prevalent in their community, and do they perceive that it's accepted in their community? And who are these, accepted by who? Are these people important? Are they their partners or their faith leaders or various members of their communities? So this is really kind of how we've thought about the interventions that we've put into place and supported, and the evidence that we're trying to get in order to better think about how to deliver some of these interventions. And then our next slide. You might click one more time. And just click a couple times. My apologies for the animations. So I don't think we need to really go through this. If you guys have this presentation, maybe you could look at it a little bit more. But we've been doing this for about 4 or 5 hours. We're in our 6th year currently. This is really kind of one of the things that we've been building up towards in terms of our understanding of the various projects that we've been supporting, of the evidence that we're finding. And this is just kind of, we've used all this evidence and thinking to really focus on, thinking about how social norms change and how we can support these within programming. So the next slide. And okay, so what we've actually done thus far, and as I mentioned, we're transitioning from supporting programs in the field and for doing background reviews, and we're in our final sort of year starting to think about our legacy. So thinking about what did we learn through our programming, what did we learn through our networks and our relationships with other institutions, as well as some of the reviews and looking at the global evidence as well. So some of the things that we've helped develop help do is, and we have documents and products to support each one of these points, develop a common social norms and gender norms language. That we've created a tool that I think it was just actually mentioned, the social norms exploration tool a second ago, that is, a set of exploratory participatory activities to, if we don't know what kind of social norms are undergirding a behavior in a particular context, that we have tools to help us to rapidly diagnose what these social norms are so that we can adapt programming or think about programming, or even think about how we want to measure social norms and norms change. We have a lot of different tools to design, to help design norm shifting approaches and to support scale-up. To monitor and evaluate norms, measure, particularly amongst the monitoring, at that field level, as well as we've created a couple of measures to essentially measure this abstract concept of norms and evaluate how successful these programs are at shifting norms. And then we've also helped programs to access timely and high quality evidence and tools. Okay, so next slide. So yeah, so these are sort of the areas that now that we're starting to think about, our legacy and starting to think about, what we found and what we still need to find and how to package that to actually be useful to various communities. These are sort of what we focused on in terms of our contributions: advancing understanding, improving implementation, enhancing evaluation, and strengthening scale-up. And then, yeah, so that's all just a little sort of bit of background in terms of where we are. I had to really break that down and make it very quick. We've been working on this for a number of years, and there's a number of different pieces that are sort of coming out of this. But now I kind of want to transition to what I'm thinking in terms of the ask for this particular group. So if you may go to the next slide. Oh, well, one more slide before then. So, as we've been reflecting upon what we've been doing thus far, thinking about the remaining challenges, one of the ones is to generate evidence on how norms change, social and gender norms, and how they can be measured, as well as generate learnings around social norms practice for programs. So these are two things that we've started to scratch the surface on within our own work and the work that we've been doing these previous years. But this is sort of one thing that we wanted to put a lot of our energy in this final year to really start thinking about what products might be useful for programmers, for researchers, for donors, and really base it and ground it within that evidence for what we've done and other evidence that we're trying to look at, in the global literature. Particularly around, social and gender norms. Okay, so now I will transition to the ask. All right, so if you may click this. So what we're currently doing is conducting a wide-ranging scoping review that we've conducted with the University of California at San Diego. And we've essentially, created a very wide-ranging search strategy that we have a couple thousand hits that we're divvying out in various sorts of ways based on a number of different research questions. So one, what evidence do we have for associations between social norms and adolescent sexual reproductive health behaviors? So do norms actually matter for these behaviors that we're interested in? What evidence do we have for efficacy of adolescent youth sexual reproductive health norm shifting interventions? So what interventions have we been shown that actually work in the real world? What social norms measures, quantitative and qualitative, do we have for assessing norms? So it's a subjective thing quite often and very abstract. So it creates a lot of measurement challenges for us. And this is sort of one of the primary areas that I actually work in. So what measures do we have out there, and can those be adapted for other contexts? And then finally, more on the implementation science side of things, what evidence do we have on acceptability, feasibility, cost, and scale of adolescent youth sexual reproductive health norm shifting interventions? So these are four broad areas that we're really trying to look at that large scoping review that we did and see what kind of support or what kind of pieces of or what manuscripts that we have really that speak to each one of these questions. And that's really kind of where we're looking for, assistance. We want to just sort of give you an idea on, what it is that we do, but also think about engaging you all in ways that would be mutually beneficial in terms of thinking about what might be some of the best products, maybe potentially helping us through an interpretation of some of this literature. And so there are a number of different products that we're thinking about developing based off of this. And yeah, so I think that we really could benefit considerably by the diverse perspectives and experiences of this group here. I'm just a researcher, so I'm oftentimes just siloed in a very numbers-oriented, research-based perspective. So these are things that we're just trying to think about, linking up with experiences of other working groups as we go through and, see what we're seeing from the evidence and to start to mold that into deliverables and products that might be useful for the field. So next slide. And this is kind of what I was talking about. So based on this evidence review, so thus far we've just essentially brought up, we know all of this literature base that is going to be helpful for us. We've started to divvy that out to the various research questions that we have. And that's kind of where we are right now. So we still need to do a lot of interpretation around, the literature that we found. And then to start to think about, at least some of the products that as we're going into our Passages legacy, as we're, wrapping up a lot of learning and starting to put together some products that hopefully reflect, what we've learned as, IRH as well as a social norms community. We've been interested in, formulating and developing a social norms advocacy brief for donor and high-level implementers. So really a succinct document based on the evidence that we have that show social norms matter for these behaviors and that social norms can be changed in beneficial ways or shifted in beneficial ways. A future social norms research agenda. So based off of, the work that we've done thus far, still the remaining gaps and to, bring some of the community, the social norms and gender norms community together to think about, what questions remain and how we might be able to garner resources and networks to be able to answer some of those. And then a digital platform with evidence summaries for social norms and select youth behaviors. We're trying to create an online tool that really brings out that evidence base for a select number of behaviors. And we still haven't prioritized those behaviors. So one of the things that might be interesting for this group is what are those behaviors that might be of most interest to us to be able to build these case studies out about the evidence that we're seeing within social norms. Understanding normative change as a continuum. So we're trying to think of it, you think about as sort of norm shifting and what it takes to shift norms and sort of those thresholds in order to achieve like normative change as well as behavior change. And then finally, a number of manuscript opportunities that we're looking at going after. So yeah, I hope this wasn't wholly unfocused, but it's basically, we have just a large amount of literature right now that we're trying to figure out various ways to cut up and to turn those into products. And we really like your help and your thoughts and you're coming from your diverse experiences. And we thought that this might be a good opportunity for a working group around that. And I don't know if Kate or Jamie, if you have two colleagues on the call as well, if they might have anything to add. Otherwise, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Brian, Jamie had to jump off, but I did want to flag that there's a question from Lisa about how has developmental stages figure into the social norms cognitively, concrete thinkers to abstract thinkers, and how does that figure into program development?
Sorry, let me see this.
If it's okay to unmute myself. Brian, really what I was looking at was you talked about the normative continuum, but I guess part of that is overlaying then adolescent development and moving from concrete thinking to more abstract thinking. And also, I guess part of it from a program perspective is there's the role for the adults who are working with the youth in the programming aspect. So part of it's when you look at field workers who are doing things on the ground in helping with that transition. So as you're thinking about deliverables and information, it would be good to think about that from the perspective. Mm-hmm. Really some hands-on aspects of what they could do, like to make these normative changes occur. I like this. I'm really excited to see more and hear more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a part of a team. So there's a number of us that are working on various aspects of this. So the continuum is one of, I think it came from a USAID sort of gender continuum that we kind of recognized that we were thinking about social norms, norm shifting, and the language that we were using as well in a rather simplified way, and started to look at that gender framework that USAID has put out and start to try and think about how we potentially can think about that within the realm of, or within the social norms as well, what kind of products that can bring out in terms of, is it a framework or, papers. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And that's something that some of my colleagues are very much working towards.
Thank you so much, Brian. So I think for those who are also, I can see people expressing interest on how they can be involved in the Passage project. We'll also be able to share a link to your email so that you're able to sign up in case you're interested. And Brian and the Passage team will be able to pick it up from there. So in case if you're interested, I'll put my email also in the chat box, and Heather will also put hers. In case you have any questions, again, it's towards your interest of expression towards the Passage project, just send us an email and we'll also be able to connect you. But also just to note that the working group will also be under the gender unity of practice discussion group in the website. So also feel free, we'll be putting up the link up there also for you to be able to sign up and also to get in. So thank you very much, Brian, for for that brief detail. And this, for sure, this is a very good project that people can engage with. And I know people like Winnie Talam from Baringo who are working around FGM. This will be a plus. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. I'll call in Heather just to say a word of you before we wrap up.
Thank you, everyone. I know we're a little over time. I appreciate your active participation today. We tried to make this an interactive group where we really get your input and your ideas based on our last meeting. And moving forward, we're going to go ahead and set some concrete topics for our next couple of meetings, as I mentioned, and perhaps get involved and do some presenting. We'll also be finalizing a document, which is our Gender Community of Practice Charter, and we will share that with you. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, please email Sheila or myself, and we will follow up on email about the Passages Project and how to sign up. So thank you, everybody. Oh, Catherine, did you have a?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say that we do have a sign-up sheet for the Social Norms and Youth Working Group. So I can, we're going to send that up via email. I can also drop it in the chat right now if you want, in case anybody wants to.
Yes, go for it. Go for it. Okay. So Catherine is also, you can sign up, click on that link. It's a Google Doc to express your interest, and we'll also send it via email. So, yeah. Great. Well, thank you everyone for your participation, and sorry we're a few minutes over, but we'll be in touch, and enjoy the rest of your day.